Welcome back. This is lesson 3A of Module 12, From Risks and Auditors to an Itinerary with Meaning, where we move from risks and auditor assignments to an audit itinerary that actually means something. Now, in the previous lessons, we defined the audit objective, translated it into high-level questions, and then turned those questions into two sets of sticky notes: where to go and what requirements to check. Now the question becomes, how do we turn all that into a smart audit route? This is where we ended in the last lesson. Okay, so we already know the places we need to visit during the audit, the yellow sticky notes, and we already have a first view of the ISO 9001 clauses that may matter in each area, the orange sticky notes. But this is still only raw material. The next step is to decide what deserves more attention. Who should audit what, and in what sequence the audit should unfold. So before choosing the route, I want to overlay risk onto the map. We already have recent operational signals. Let's look at them. Okay, so more customer complaints about leakage in AP 300 pumps. Okay, another one, several CNC machine breakdowns, and defective seals from 2 suppliers. Now, these issues tell me that some sticky notes deserve more attention than others. So if I start with a complaint about leakage in AP 300 pumps, some audit locations immediately become more important. So customer support matters because this is where the problem becomes visible. Final inspection matters because I want to know what was released. The lab, the testing lab, matters because I may need to understand the test logic. And assembly matters because the defect may have been created there. So the complaint already begins to shape the route. Now, let's look at the machine breakdowns in CNC machining. So that pushes machining to the front, of course. But not only that, it also brings in maintenance because I want to understand equipment reliability and response. And it brings in production management because recurring instability should trigger planning decisions, prioritization, and escalation. So one operational issue already opens up a wider system trail. And now the supplier issue. If defective seals were recently delivered, I want to look at supply chain, incoming inspection, warehouse, and again, assembly. Now, supply chain because of supplier selection and follow-up. Incoming inspection because of detection at receipt. And warehouse because of segregation and lot control. And assembly because even if the defect came from outside, I still need to know how it entered the product. So now the picture becomes much more interesting. I am no longer looking at all sticky notes as if they have the same weight. So I can see clusters of higher audit interest. And that matters because of a meaningful audit plan is not built on symmetry. No, it's built on where the evidence is most likely to tell me something important. In those situations, in those areas, I need more time, bigger sample, more questions. In this slide, we have the areas with more risk in red, but in real life, when I use sticky notes, so what I do is I put a special mark there, okay? Something like a star or a cross, or sometimes I even put like the skull and the bones, like in the Union Jack flag, okay? Like the pirate flag, yeah. Now, once I see the higher risk areas, I can think about auditor assignment. Okay. Now, I look into the strengths of each auditor. So auditor A, in this case for Alpha Pumps, is the lead auditor, is stronger on system effectiveness, process interfaces, complaints, corrective actions, supplier controls, and management interviews. So auditor A should take the parts of the audit where cross-functional thinking and system judgment are especially important. So quality, management, customer support, supply chain, and incoming inspection and engineering. And okay, also production management. Now let's see auditor B. What are his or her strengths? So this auditor is stronger in manufacturing operations, shop floor observation, technical detail, practical verification, testing, maintenance, and material flow. So auditor B is better placed to go deeper into the physical reality of operations and compare what is supposed to happen with what actually happens. So I want him to or her to audit machining and assembly. I want to audit the maintenance, the warehouse, packaging and shipping, and the human resources, and also the logistics. Now, I want also that some areas, okay, I think that it's better for those areas to be audited by both auditors, okay? So some areas it makes sense to work together, the audit team. So assembly, the lab, and the final inspection are good examples, okay? So these are places where technical detail and system interpretation may both matter at the same time. So joint auditing here can give us stronger evidence and better shared understanding. I don't know if you have this is experience of auditing alone or auditing together. It's incredible. Of course, it's not so efficient in terms of time or using time, but it's interesting. One of the auditors is asking questions, and the other is looking for evidence, is just listening. And it's like they are operating in different wavelengths, and it's incredible the amount of information and how that information is understood by different auditors at the same time. Okay, now we arrive at the real planning question. What is the best itinerary, okay, for the audit? So where should I go first? Where should I go there? Why should I go there? What am I hoping to learn there? And how will that help me decide where to go next? So those are the kind of questions that turn an audit plan from a schedule, a simple schedule, into a line of inquiry. And the first thing I want to say is this: there is no universally best route through an organization. The best itinerary is not the most convenient route. It's not the route that follows the organization chart. And it's not the route people use just because they used it last year. No, the best itinerary is the one that gives me the best chance of collecting relevant evidence, reliable evidence, and connected evidence. So I can answer the audit objective with confidence. Remember, lesson 1, everything is started with the audit objective. So from this point on, I want to show not just a route, but the reasoning behind the route. So the particular route will be on lesson 3B. Now is the reasoning behind developing the route, okay? To do that, I need to think in flows, not boxes. Processes do not live inside departments. They cut across functions. So information moves, materials move, decisions move, approvals move, controls move, records move. So if I design the audit only around departmental boundaries, I may visit many places and still fail to understand how the system actually works. So the audit route should therefore follow the flow of what is being planned, produced, checked, released, delivered, and reviewed. And this is a big shift for less experienced auditors. So instead of asking which department comes next, we should ask, where does the evidence flow next? Mm-hmm. Flow forward or flow backwards? This is a very good moment to introduce the backward flow approach. Sometimes the best itinerary begins at the end, not with the procedure, not with the organization chart, not with the opening explanation. It may begin with the released product, the delivered service, the completed order, the complaint, the missed deadline, the field failure, the accepted batch, or the performance result. Why? Because the effect gives the auditor something real to anchor the audit to. So instead of beginning with description, the auditor begins with reality. So in this case, the recent complaint trend, okay, I can start with, for example, with the customer support. Getting information about the complaints. The machine instability can make me start at machining. The supplier defect can make me start at incoming inspection. So these are not just problems, okay? They are the starting points for the audit logic, okay? Now, once I start with the effect, I can walk backward through the process. And at each step, I ask the same kind of questions. Who made this happen? Based on what information, under what controls, with which resources, following what criteria, and with what evidence? And this gives the audit sequence a strong logic. So instead of moving randomly from department to department, I am tracing the chain of conditions that had to be true for that result to happen. And if something went wrong, I am tracing the chain of conditions that allowed the failure to happen. Let me show you a simple example of how the information avalanche works in practice. I like to use this metaphor of the avalanche. It's something that is growing up, okay, with the audit. So I start in customer support. There, I learned something very important. Several AP300 complaints say that the leakage appears very soon after installation, sometimes on the first day of use. Now, that immediately gives me a stronger line of thinking. So, if the failure appears so quickly, then I have a reasonable hypothesis. Perhaps this was not a long-term wear problem. Perhaps it was a condition that already existed when the product left the factory. So I take that information with me to the next audit, where to go. So to final inspection. And now my questions become much sharper. I can ask, so if the failure appears immediately after installation, what release checks should have detected that condition before shipment? Then I can ask to see the final inspection and release records for those batches or periods. And I can probe further. Was there any abnormal result, concession, retest, or borderline acceptance? So, notice what is happening here. I am no longer asking final inspection general questions. I am asking targeted questions shaped by what I learned later in the process, okay, closer to the customer, okay, later in the process, but in terms of audit, upstream, the audit flow, okay? Then I take the combined information from customer support and final inspection into the lab. Now I am in an even stronger position. I can ask, how exactly is the leak test performed for AP300? What are the acceptance limits? And depending on what I saw in final inspection, I may also ask whether borderline results are retested, how retests are controlled, and whether a unit with a marginal result could still end up being released. So this is the key lesson. The audit is not just a sequence of separate visits. Each step gives me information that makes the next step more intelligent. And this is what the itinerary matters, or this is why the itinerary matters. And that is why the backward flow approach is so powerful. I start from the effect, and then I walk backward, carrying better questions with me. But backward flow should not stop at the physical or operational flow. Once the first trail is visible, the auditor should expand into the broader control system. So that means planning, competence, equipment, monitoring, escalation, non-conforming handling, management review, and improvement. So this is where the audit becomes more than tracing a product or a complaint. It becomes an audit of whether the system is actually capable of producing that result consistently. Remember, lesson 1, the audit objective, that capability. So the root begins with the effect, walks backward through the process, and then expands into the controls that are supposed to make that effect reliable. A good audit itinerary is cumulative. It's not just a schedule, it is a learning path. What I learn early in the audit should help me do a better job later in the audit. So it should help me sharpen later questions, choose better samples, test explanations, challenge inconsistencies, and enrich the checklist. This is why the sequence matters. The order of visits should not be accidental. Each step should make the next step more intelligent. This is another important idea for less experienced auditors. Move through the audit by testing hypotheses. So do not just move through activities. Move also through possible explanations. For example, this complaint may have escaped at release. This variation may be linked to machine instability. This defect may be linked to supplier lots. This weak result may reflect poor escalation. Or this process may be followed formally but not consistently. Now, these are only hypotheses, they are not conclusions, okay? But good auditors use them to shape the sequence of the audit, because a hypothesis tells you what evidence to look for next and where that evidence is most likely to be found. So, that is the reasoning, okay? In lesson 3b, I hope it takes less time than this lesson 3a. I will apply this logic directly to alpha pumps and show how these ideas turn into an actual audit itinerary, okay? We will move from principles to a concrete route with timing, sequence, and justification. I hope to see you there.